That was the first bell, but I at this time invite all of our Rotarians and guests who are veterans to assemble in the hallway in preparation for the Veterans Parade in a few moments. Thank you. Good afternoon, friends, and welcome to the Rotary Club of York, the 26th largest Rotary Club in the world, and a club dedicated to imagining and living out the Rotary mission of service above self. I'm Glenn Miller, the club president. This Friday is Veterans Day. It is fitting that just following Election Day, when we have all exercised our freedom to vote, we acknowledge and honor those who have defended that freedom on our own shores and beyond. Today, we welcome each of our club members and guests who are veterans, and we thank them for their service to this country. I ask that you please remain standing as past President Bob Davis announces the Parade of Veterans accompanied by Chuck Long. Past President Davis.
Well, first of all, I have to congratulate JT Hand. JT Hand was Army all the way, and he finally saw the light, and his son just graduated from the United States Naval Academy. And I think it's fun that this banner goes on between all the services, but at the end of the day, all the services come together and we're on the same team. It's a shame the politicians can't do the same thing. Okay, on with the show. First to come in is the United States Army. Next, the United States Marine Corps. Now, it used to be that the Marines and the Army didn't go anywhere unless the United States Navy took them. Next is the United States Air Force. The United States Coast Guard. Nobody? Okay. How about the United States Merchant Marine Corps? Okay. And the last but not least is the Space Corps, and I don't think we have anybody for that. So welcome all the veterans. Thank you for your service.
Guests and Rotarians, please remain standing as the color guard from William Penn High School, JROTC, presents the colors of the United States of America, followed by the opening song and Pledge of Allegiance by Brittany Reese, and the invocation today by Eric Chase, after which our visitors will be introduced by Jules Tolbert.
Forward, march. Colors, halt. Left face. Colors, post. Present arms.
Please join me in singing the Star-Spangled Banner. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watch were so gallantly streaming, and the Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order. Arms. Left face. Forward. March.
Will you prepare yourself in a way that you're most accustomed to prepare for prayer? Let us pray. Creator God, we pause for a moment in our busy days to give thanks for the innumerable gifts and blessings we enjoy in our lives, our livelihoods, our friends, our families, but especially our freedoms. Today, we especially want to lift up our veterans and our servicemen and women in prayer. Those men and women who have faithfully and selflessly served in the armed forces of the United States, Air Force, Army, Navy, Coast Guard, Marines, Merchant Marines, and Space Force. Those men and women who have kept the flame of freedom alive and who have rekindled or kindled that flame in other countries. They have served well and given much. We particularly ask you to pour out your spirit of comfort on the troops, friends, and families, and ask you to heal the bodies, hearts, minds, and spirits of all those who are suffering in our world. We thank you for this food and the hands that have prepared and serve it. May we use it to nourish our bodies and souls as we endeavor to serve our community, our state, our nation, and our world above ourselves. And we ask this in the many names we call you. Amen.
Good morning, good afternoon. I'm pleased to have the honor of introducing our guests for today's meeting. When I call your name, please stand and remain standing until President Glenn has welcomed you. For visiting Rotarians, Jose Santiago from Uptown York. Our guests, first, these guests are guests of youth leadership. John Dandamo, Jake Dahl, Rosie Goris, Christine Heine, Paige Hoke, Cameron Leisenring, Jen Leisenring, Brett Leisenring, Dolores Mignana, Elvis Nunez, Kristen Spangler, and Yariel Volquez. Guest of our speaker, Sue Holland. Guest of the club, John Abril, Ron Garland, Yarlise Grant, Elizabeth Grulon, John Howard, Carliza Johnson, Xavier Rodriguez, Kalian Velasquez. Guest of Tom Caltagirone, Michael Caltagirone, Harry Martin, Royce, guest of Doug Berman, Royce Clemens. Guests of past President Rob Bowen, Alex Gibson, and Jenny Goodling. Guest of Joyce Santiago, Judith Higgins. Guest of President Glenn Miller, Carol Miller. Guest of Gina Spangler, Karen Negron Caraballo. Guest of Bobby Ann DeLeo, Matt Smith. And guest of past President Di Hershey, Steve Metzler.
Friends, we are delighted to have you here with us today at the Rotary Club of York. I know that you will enjoy our program, and I hope you will return to visit us again. Let me say it's a special joy to have Jose with us, who is club president, actually, of his sister club here with us today. We warmly welcome you, and we hope you know that you would be warmly welcomed should you consider joining our ranks. Rotarians, please help me welcome our visiting Rotarians and guests. You may be seated. And while you're in the mode of applause, I'm not quite sure where they are, but could we have a round of applause for our junior ROTC folks who did such a fine job for us today? Several announcements for the good of the order before we continue with our program. The Rotary Club of York Board of Directors meets tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. via Zoom. The IDEA committee will meet on Monday, the 14th of November at 8 a.m. also via Zoom. A reminder to you, and I'll do it again next week, a reminder that we have no club meeting, as is our custom, on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. We hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving and a week of travel, if that is in your plans. The membership committee would like to recognize Ron Gardner and Chuck Long. Are both of those Rotarians here? I know one is. He's got his trumpet in his hand. If you were here, please rise. All right, we'll take one out of two. Both of these Rotarians are celebrating their 25th anniversary of being members of this club. Let's give them a warm round of applause. Chuck, how's it feel to know that the president-elect nominee was about 5 years old when you joined this club 25 years ago? Just put things in perspective for you. Finally, a more serious note, the prayers and the good wishes of our club go out to Rotarian Jim May. Jim's son has been in communication with Lynn and I this week, sharing the following update on Jim's health. Jim has been under the care of the medical team at Sloan Kettering in New York for the past 2 weeks. Last week, he made the difficult decision to move forward with the amputation of his left leg. He underwent surgery this past Friday. If all goes as planned, he will be transferred to York within a couple of weeks to begin rehab. Jim has waged a strong and a valiant fight with his illness, and he continues to do so. Jim's son is tuned in watching us today, and we want to say to him that our love and our prayers surround your dad this day. So please keep Jim in your prayers. And now Lynn Morrison, our executive director, has some things to share about upcoming programs, followed by our esteemed program master, Mike Summers. Lynn.
Thank you, President Glenn. So I thought we haven't spoken for a little bit about the programs that we have planned for it's the remainder of this calendar year. So there's some great programs coming up. It's a good mix, and I wanted to just highlight them so you can bookmark them on your calendar. So next week, we're going to be welcoming Don Graham as our speaker. Many of you know Don. He's a York entrepreneur, a community leader and philanthropist who has founded numerous companies, including Graham Engineering and Graham Packaging. Don will spend his time at Rotary reflecting on his 60+ years in York, his business and philanthropic interests, and the importance of the York community in his personal growth and success. Don't come on November 23rd, come back on November 30th, and we'll be welcoming John Clapham. John is the CEO of PSC Biotech. He leads Biotechnique, an organization here in New York. They manufacture clinical products for vaccines and other life-saving therapies for their clients. John's presentation will highlight some of the projects that Biotechnique is involved with right here in York. On December 7th, we welcome back to the podium Dr. Scott Moore, Director of China Programs and Strategic Initiatives at the University of Pennsylvania. His most recent book, China's Next Act, re-envisions China's role in the world, with a focus on sustainability and technology. In his book, he argues that these shared global challenges are reshaping China's economy and foreign policy, and we should pay attention. On December 14th, we're really going to shake it up a little bit, and we're inviting Michael Price, an American writer and producer, best known for his Emmy and Writers Guild award-winning work on The Simpsons. He is a writer and co-executive producer of the ABC series Teacher's Pet, and he served as a script consultant on The Simpsons movie and wrote the Lego Star Wars special, Lego Star Wars: The Padawan Menace. He will be speaking to us via Zoom from his home in California. There should be some laughs that day. On December 21st, we're hitting the road. We're going to be hosted at York College, thanks to President Glenn. We will meet in the beautiful Yorkview Room for lunch and then proceed to Demeester Recital Hall for a holiday program that features a review of local high school student performances coordinated by our own Lynn Bergdahl. And finally, I'm pleased to share with you that next year on February 1st, we will be holding our weekly club meeting offsite at the Yorktown Hotel. So I know everybody's been waiting to get into the Yorktown and experience up close what's been happening there and see that re-envisioning of the tremendous space and the asset in the community that the Yorktown will be. We're grateful to our friends and members of the club for inviting us and their hospitality. So keep that on your radar, and no snow that day. These wonderful programs could not be possible without the hard work of our program committee and especially the leadership of past President Mike Summers. So Mike is going to come to the podium and let you know what the plans are for the next 6 months. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, so program committee meeting coming up. We need your help. And what we need is for each of you to sit there and think deeply as far as what might be a good program for Rotary for the next 6 months. So each of you take some time, each of you think hard, and each of you let me know what would be a good program. So that's it. Thank you.
We are blessed to have remarkable programming in this club. And again, that is thanks to Mike and the great work of that committee. Thank you very much. And I understand that when we're at the Yorktown in February, hard hats will not be required. So it's going to be very exciting. And now I'm pleased to welcome Alex Kedshevsky, a member of the Youth Leadership Committee, who will present our Students of the Month. Alex.
Right. So working for communities and schools of PA in New York has truly opened my eyes as to what a student is capable when they work hard to achieve their goals. It's an honor today to introduce our 2 students of the month from York Country Day. Our first student to be recognized is Yariel Volquez. Yariel is joined by his mother, Rosie Gores. His participation in school includes sports club, choir, photography, and leisure. And his hobbies include reading, writing, coaching, and volunteering. His career plans include psychology, attend college, and my personal favorite, have new experiences. So would you please welcome up Yariel.
Bonjour, hola, and hello to everyone in this room. I am very grateful for this opportunity to speak about something of interest to you all, and I hope you'll bear with me as this is the first time I've delivered any kind of speech. Thank you all once again. I was born and raised by the best parents I could have wished for. They functioned as any family would, yet they were the greatest in my eyes. As a kid, I learned many things from them and my siblings, which helped me in the long run. Along with the care and knowledge my family shared with me, school offered a formal education that is so vital. School is defined as an institution that educates children. During that time, children accumulate a hefty amount of information, education, and knowledge. However, where there is good, there's also the bad. It can also be a place that allows for bullying, violence, and unfairness. Today, I would like to speak about my experience on how school introduced me to the concept of self-comparison and how I came to overcome it. In a social context, an educational system often harbors a variety of latent functions or unintended outcomes, these being bullying, violence, or much worse. Many people who have attended school or still do have at least once experienced an unintended outcome. As for me, I encountered something different. I fell into the temptation of comparison. Although comparison can lead to self-improvement, it can also be a factor to feeling inferior. During my middle school year, and possibly even earlier grades, I had a speech impediment. I regularly stuttered when speaking, and I found it difficult to convey sentences to others. This created an academic gap between me and many of my friends who excelled in school. My speech impediment constantly reminded me of how I was different and compared to those I considered normal, and my being unable to live life like them. It's not fair, I would say to myself. How can kids my age talk normally, but I can't? As time progressed, I learned to adapt and accept. Humans aren't born perfect. We all face challenges throughout our lives and learn to overcome them. Comparison was a challenge that I had to learn to live with. Now as a teenager, I participate in many activities, one being the gym workouts that I occasionally go to. And while there, I see muscular men with muscles on top of muscles working out. They grunt, they shout, and they look strong. Then I compare myself to them and see many differences. Their muscles versus my muscles, their body build versus my body build. Nevertheless, I continue living and enjoying who I am and what I'm doing. Humans constantly compare themselves, whether it be academically or athletically. However, that comparison shouldn't take away the joy you have for the activity or one's personal outlook. So how exactly did I overcome self-comparison? Rather than bumming myself out because of the bulkiness of a person's body, I instead counted my blessings. I have 2 arms, 2 legs, functioning fingers, and movable toes. And I wish 20/20 vision, but here I am with glasses. So why exactly should I bring myself down when I have all these blessings right in front of me? Thank you.
Thank you for that. And our second student of the month is Cameron Leesering. Cameron is joined by her parents, Brett and Jen Leesering, today. While at Your Country Day, Cameron enjoys swimming, working with the yearbook committee, homecoming committee, theater, co-publisher of the school paper, sewing and crochet club. My wife would love you. While not doing all these amazing things, Cameron finds time for jewelry making, swimming, writing, poetry, and reading. Cameron awards and distinctions include International Thespian Society, National Art Honor Society, National Honor Society, Heads Advisory, and Headmasters List. Wow. Her career plans include journalism and entrepreneur. Please welcome our student month, Cameron.
Good afternoon. I would like to begin by thanking you all for having me here today. I've attended Country Day for almost 6 years, and in that time, I discovered a love for meeting new people and socializing. However, being able to stand here and speak with you all today is not something that I was always able to do. I've gone through a long journey of taking risks and coming out of my comfort zone in order to have the confidence that I now possess. At my previous school, I suffered from bullying, which made making friends a challenge. Throughout middle school and my beginning year of high school, speaking up was difficult, and I lacked the confidence in myself in order to fill any leadership positions. Last year, however, I was the president of our school's Green Team, an organization focused on sustainability and making our school more eco-friendly. Over the summer, I worked as a camp counselor, working with children ages 3 through 12, and I quickly became a role model for them. Both of these experiences helped me gain confidence in filling a leadership position and improved my public speaking skills. Although coming out of my comfort zone is an independent venture, my ultimate inspiration comes from my parents. My father has always told me that success doesn't come from comfort. Last year, my parents began to notice how much I was struggling socially. I felt stuck in various relationships because I knew that I had more potential than what I was foreseeing at that time. I consistently followed what everyone else was doing and rarely made my own opinions or decisions. I felt as though I was standing still while everyone else was moving rapidly around me. My mother told me that sometimes, in order to do what your heart needs, you need to do something that your brain doesn't want. For me, that meant coming out of my comfort zone and enhancing my circle of friends. The thought of branching out and forming new friendships terrified me, but once I did, I began feeling more confident and free to form my own opinions independently. I hope this can be a lesson to us all that although an environment may feel normal or safe, being comfortable will never allow you space to grow. I used to live my life comfortably, but I didn't start growing or succeeding until I left that environment. I encourage everyone to incorporate this ethos into your life. Push yourself to do something that you normally wouldn't and see where that takes you. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex, and congratulations to our two students. We are very grateful for your presence with us here today. And let me just say that I think I speak for the whole club when I say that we are relieved to know that the future of humanity is in such remarkable and capable hands. And to our first speaker, you were both excellent, but let me just say, because of what you said, if that was your first attempt at a public speech, I hope I'm around to hear the next one and the next one and the next one. Very well done. Rotarians, please help me in congratulating again our two students of the month. And now, without further ado, our future club president, Courtney Bailey Piccolo, will introduce today's speaker. Courtney.
Today, I have the privilege of introducing you to our speaker, Colonel Dale Holland, retired as the Vice Commander, 89th Airlift Wing, Andrews Air Force Base. The wing is responsible for worldwide special air mission, airlift, and logistics, as well as aerial communications support for the President, Vice President, Cabinet members, combatant commanders, and other senior military and elected leaders as tasked by the White House, Air Force Chief of Staff, and Air Mobility Command. Colonel Holland received his commission through Kent State University Air Force, ROTC, in 1988. Upon completion of undergraduate navigator training at Mather Air Force Base, he was assigned to the 55th Weather Reconnaissance Squadron, McClellan Air Force Base, flying the WC-135B. In the summer of 2001, he joined the Presidential Air Crew and assumed the position as Presidential Navigator on Air Force One, the Presidential Airlift Group, 89th Airlift Wing, Andrews Air Force Base. Previously, he was assigned as the Deputy Director of Operations for the White House Military Office. Colonel Holland is a master navigator with over 4,600 hours. He has commanded twice at the squadron level as the Presidential Airlift Squadron, Andrews Air Force Base, and in combat support operations at the 407th Expeditionary Operations Support Squadron at Ali Air Base, Iraq. Colonel Holland is a graduate from the U.S. Air Force's Air War College, Air Command and Staff College, and Central Michigan University, holding master's degrees in strategic studies, military operational, art and science, and public administration. Rotarians, if you could please help me welcome to the stage Colonel Dale Holland.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me today. On the way up, my wife and I were in Washington, D.C., and I said, hey, we're going to York, Pennsylvania. And everybody knows what York, Pennsylvania is famous for, right? Obviously, the Weightlifter Hall of Fame and the York Barbell Company. But really, York is really known for having the 26th largest Rotary Club in the world. And I'm very proud to be here today. I will tell you, Rotary is alive and well. My wife and I recently returned to a trip from India for a vacation. And in New Delhi and in Jaipur, a lot of evidence of Rotary is evidence in that part of the world. So your hard work is going on in a truly international environment. So thank you for that also. So today I have a special discussion to talk to you about. And it's more of a story. And it's my story. It's not your story, but it's my story. When I was a little kid, my mom called us in and said, hey, kids, get in here and watch TV. Well, how many times did your parents ever call you in to watch TV? That was the summer of 1969. And right there in front of the black and white TV, we watched a man climb off of a ladder and set foot on the moon. That's where I was at when Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon. Do you remember where you were at that day? Or how about other days in our history, sad days when President Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas? Do you remember where you were at if you were alive then? There's certain things in our history of our country that you always know where you are at, or it plants a seed in your brain, in your journey in life. Back in 2001, I was honored to be assigned to a new aircraft in the Air Force. As a navigator, I flew many airplanes around the world, visiting over 90 countries around the world, but this was a really cool airplane. I was really excited to be part of the crew. And we actually flew to Jacksonville the night before and then into Sarasota. Well, during that morning, I met my sister and we had breakfast and I was giving her a tour of the airplane. And it was really cool for me to show her, hey, this is what I'm doing now. And these are the guys and gals I'm working with. As I was giving her a tour of the airplane, we just got up to the flight deck and one of the radio operators came up to me and said, hey, Major Holland, an airplane just hit the World Trade Center. An airplane hit the World Trade Center in New York City. So thinking back when I was a kid, my mom reminded me of a story. In 1945, a B-25 Mitchell bomber flew into the Empire State Building and hit the 79th floor. And I'm sure none of you remember that event, but I was thinking maybe an airplane could have flown into the World Trade Center. Maybe the weather was bad. Really, what could have happened? But I did think of that instance. In that tragedy in 1945, 14 people were killed, 11 office workers and the 3 crew members. But I'm thinking, man, whenever that happened. So my sister looked at me and said, that looks kind of serious. I said, well, it's probably a news helicopter or something like that. We'll figure it out. A couple of minutes later, radio operator came and said, hey, sir, a second airplane just hit the World Trade Center. That day, September 11th, 2001, and that airplane was Air Force One. That's not Photoshop. That's the photo. Back then, you guys don't remember, but cameras had a little digital thing you could program the date, and that was a pretty big deal. And at that time, the airplane was Air Force One, and I was in Sarasota, Brightington, and I was a crew member on that day. A day that started off like any other day in our country, but soon turned into something different. Always be prepared. You never know what the day may bring, but I didn't see this day coming. But the training that the Air Force has given me and our colleagues on that air crew were prepared. September 11, 2001, our mission was to get the president back to Washington, D.C. Air Force One, you see, is not just the president's transportation. Air Force One is a continuation of the office of the presidency, a word you never really hear of. You always hear of the president, but it's actually a bigger office, just one individual, male or female. It's the office of the presidency, and our job is to maintain that continuity of government and make sure the president's safe and sound. At that time, I looked at my sister and I said, I love you, but you got to go. Her eyes got big and I escorted her off the airplane. I said, I need you to hang out here in the press pit at the base of the stairs. Don't move, don't make any sudden movements because the president's coming to the airplane. Colonel Tillman said, hey, Dale, we're getting ready to go back. The man's on the way. Get the airplane ready to go. I already had everything programmed, jumped in the seat. President, as you know, was at a school reading to a 3rd grade class. Secretary Card whispered in his ear what had happened. It was time to go into action. President was concerned on where everyone was at, where the vice president was at, where his wife was at, where his kids were at. Continuity of government kicked in right away also. Secretary of State was down in Colombia. Got to get him back. Got to get everybody back. Could be any way, any type of attack on our nation. But after the tower started to fall, then the rumors fell. White House was a target. Capitol was a target. Now the fog and friction of that day started to take hold. President came back to Air Force One. We were airborne. This is my 4th flight on Air Force One. I just recently graduated from Air Command and Staff College. This is my first assignment on Air Force One after flying for for the vice president, the first lady for 6 years earlier. As we continue on climbing out, that airplane's screaming out. We hear we're a target, angels, threats coming your way. Nobody knows that call sign for Air Force One back then. Secret Service had reports. We had some fast moving aircraft heading towards us, but 747, that size is a big aircraft, but it's also a big target, but it's very, very fast and agile the way that we fly that aircraft. As we continue to climb out, and never forget this as long as I live, there was an American airline flight coming out of Miami, checking in Orlando Center, American 453, heading this morning to Dallas. And the air traffic controller said, negative 453, turn right and land immediately in Orlando. There's a national emergency. The FAA and our government came into a program that we had during the Cold War, and they were able to ground all commercial traffic and lock down our borders within a matter of minutes. All commercial aircraft were grounded immediately because they didn't know how many were hijacked, how many other aircraft are out there. Now we started hearing reports that the Pentagon was attacked, and there's still a couple aircraft missing. Our job again is to maintain the office of the presidency, make sure that he is safe. As we flew up through the middle of Florida, this little older female came up, and I'm looking at her like, and where did we get her from? I didn't even know she was on the airplane. She came up and said, she pulled out the Constitution, said, we got to enact this act and this, and it's like, aye, ma'am, we're moving the airplane, we're moving the man. She said, we're not going back to Washington, D.C. Of course not. We made a left-hand turn over the panhandle of Florida. As we were flying in the left-hand side, heading into the panhandle of Florida, the military aide of the president came up to the flight deck. And it's like, hey, we need to go into Tyndall Air Force Base. Well, what are we going to do there? That was not the answer. Haunting. Never forget that. Never forget that sight. That was after the second aircraft had impacted the World Trade Center. We're en route, flying. So the plan then was for us to take the president, and he wanted to address the nation. Back then, we didn't have the communications capability. How many people had cell phones in 2001? Think about that. I bet most of you are carrying 2 cell phones in your pocket right now. You might have had a flip phone. You might have had an old saddlebag phone. What do you see on the top of the second tower there? Communication array of antennas that controlled the whole East Coast of the United States, New York, all the way down. Communication was at a standstill when those buildings collapsed. Now you have fog and friction of the war. What's going on? What are we going to do? Where's my mom? Where's my husband? Where's my kids? President did the same thing. Where's my wife? Where's my daughters? Get me in touch with the White House. He was talking to the vice president, who happened to be relocated into the east wing of the White House, and the president's emergency operations center under the east wing of the White House. Not a lot of people talk about that facility, but it's there. Vice president had his staff in there communicating with the president as best they could. Back in 2001, we had just made friends with our old friends, the Soviet Union. So we thought there's no enemy for the US now. We're good. That was our main enemy. We in the United States let our guard down. We used to have strip fighters sitting alert, Florida, all the way up the East Coast and northern tier, West Coast. Stood them down. They were no longer flying armed alert. Nobody thought anyone would ever need that capability again. As we come over the northern panhandle of Florida, heading in Alabama and Mississippi, somebody joined our wings. We had 2 F-16s come out of Houston Air Force Base at Ellington Field flying for the reserves. They were the only guys still sitting alert on that day with armed fighters. They came all the way from Houston to join Air Force One over southern Louisiana, because that was the quickest asset we could get for an escort for Air Force One that day. They were told, Cavalry 44, 44, and 45 flight, fly heading 120. You'll see your target. Do not engage him, but escort them. Roger, what's our target? You will know the target when you see it. Imagine those 2 F-16 fighter pilots sitting there flying out of Houston going, heck is this? Look at how big their eyes got when they saw it was Air Force One. And as they joined us, at that time, the decision was made for Air Force One to go into Barksdale Air Force Base, Louisiana. Who knows what Barksdale Air Force Base is famous for? B-52 sitting nuclear alert, correct? What a place to take the president. You could not get more secure Air Force base than a base with B-52s. However, they're having a real world exercise that day. We're taking the president into an airfield that now has armed bombers that were actually doing a real world mission, and it just so happened to coincide with their real world alert exercise. Hindsight, that probably wasn't the right place to take them, but it made sense that day for us on Air Force One. President, we landed in Barksdale, and as we're landing, the F-16 provided a combat air patrol over Barksdale Air Force Base. As we're landing, I'm thinking, man, these guys are good. Look at them. They got their M16s. They're sitting ready to go. They're ready for war. I wonder how they got ready so quick. Well, they're in a real world exercise. So their exercise became real world all of a sudden. Here's an actual picture from that day. As we land, the president's whisked away to go into the headquarters building to talk to the wing commander and to get as much communication as he can. The president made a taped message of what happened, where we were doing, where he was at to assure the nation that he was safe and had control of the situation. What the people in America did not know, that was a recorded message. And the strict instructions were not to give that message out for about 20 minutes until after we were airborne and heading to our next destination. Air Force One that day, as we're sitting on the ground, we ordered 150,000 pounds of fuel, enough food for 30 days because we didn't know how long we'd be flying or what the next obstacle would be this day. As we're doing that, the F-16 flight flew over and said, Air Force One, Cutaway 445 flight. We have a bogey south of the airfield. You want us to take him out? Everything else has been grounded that day. Do you want us to take him out? Holy cow, that's a lot to ask. We said, why don't you get a visual? So the F-16 flew in to get a visual. Who knows what kind of airplane that was that day? Anyone have any idea? Now you're in Shreveport, Louisiana. It was a crop duster. Think about that. There's some crop duster pilot, he's got a cigarette in his mouth, and he's flying in crop dust in his field. He had no idea what's going on in the real world, and nor would he. You think he got a little shock when all of a sudden that fighter comes zipping up on his wing? You'd like to talk to him someday. See how many days he aged that day in that flight. F-16 came back overhead, continued to fly their cap over the base. President came back. One thing on Air Force One, we always carry a press pool or contingent of press individuals, 14 individuals from the White House press office. That day they got to see Shreveport because we removed them from the airplane. They had no reason to stay along with our flight that day. How they got back, there's always a train, Greyhound bus, I'm sure goes through here. So we were able to drop that contingent off. Our destination at that time was Offutt Air Force Base in Omaha, Nebraska. How many remember the old Strategic Air Command movies or all the old SAC movies where Offutt Air Force Base was the center of the US and the communication bunkers and things like that to survive a bad day? As we're flying into Omaha, I called the base weather shop at Andrews. I had a presidential weather support flight. And I said, Mr. Z, Major Holland, hey, sir. I said, hey, I got a weird question for you. Where should I not go in our country today? Where should I not take this airplane? Instead of saying, I want to go here, just tell me where I shouldn't go. And he said, got it. Understand what you want. Do not go to the Pacific Northwest. I said, it wasn't even in my plan. He said, I didn't think it was. He said, everything else is good to go. He's been around the mission and what we do a lot, so he knew kind of where we're heading. Destination, Offutt Air Force Base. Back then, before I was at Andrews, I was stationed in Omaha, Nebraska from 93 to 96. And I remember the local TV stations. Again, I talk about technology and the updates on aircraft, especially Air Force One. Back then, how many people remember having a TV with ABC, NBC, CBS, click, 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 click. That's what we had on Air Force One that day. And I knew, hey, dial in channel 3 as we get closer to Omaha. That's a local news station. I remember watching it. Click, 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 channel 3. There's a reporter out at Offutt Air Force Base. And I'm here at Offutt Air Force Base. There's a lot of things going on in New York City. We just learned of an airplane in Shanksville, Pennsylvania that just crashed. And I'm here watching the E-4B doing their transition, which is another 747 that the Air Force flies out of Omaha, Nebraska. And there's one coming in on final right now. And you hear the guy, you see him in his earpiece. Wait a minute, that's not an E-4B. That's that looks like Air Force One. And lo and behold, the cat's out of the bag as we're coming in off at Air Force Base in Omaha, Nebraska that day. Goal was the president needed to address his cabinet, his family, figure out what was going on and get any intel reports. As we land at Offutt, the president's whisked down into a hole, into a 5-story bunker to be able to address his cabinet. During that time, because of the technology change, the president was really upset with our command and control capability from Air Force One that day. We had some old SAC warriors on the aircraft, the radio operators. They knew of old UHF systems and things that were still existing. That were old Cold War 1970s, 80s technology that might still be manned, and they were. And they were able to get phone patches and relay information through some old military networks, which were pretty impressive. If we wouldn't have had those guys on board that day, the president might have been really constricted in this conversation of what we could do until we were on the ground. As we land at Offutt Air Force Base, the flight crew, we went into base operations, which is pretty far away. I don't know if you spent time at Offutt or not. The RC-135s, the EC, or the EB, the E1, the E4 sits on a different part of the ramp away from base ops. So it's probably a 10-minute drive. President goes down the hole, says, "Dag nabbit, that's it. I'm going home. We're going back to Washington, D.C." Kind of like a John Wayne scenario, if you will. Time to go back home and figure out what's going on. President gets back to the airplane. We meet the F-16 pilots from Houston. We're sitting there at base ops talking. They're getting as much gas as they can right now. We tell them we're heading back to the airplane. We're heading directly right back to Andrews Air Force Base so the president can address the nation. So we take off. Now, your bombers that you flew were pretty quick, but that day, Air Force One, we pushed the speed up to 0.98 Mach. Okay, speed of sound is 1.0. So that's pretty fast for a 747 to go scooting across the heartland of America. As we're flying across Iowa, the fighters coming out of Offutt said, "Hey, Air Force One, slow down, we can't catch you." Think of it, a fighter jet is kind of like a cheetah. It can run, but it can't run a long distance. It's a short spurt. So they started burning all their fuel as they're screaming across Iowa to catch us. So by the time we got to Indiana and coming in to Ohio border, he said, "Air Force One, you need to slow down." Well, we're not slowing down, but we ended up doing a series of steep turns to kind of lose time, and we did a 360 so the fighters could join us. As we rolled out on 360 coming into Ohio, fighters came out of Langley Air Force Base and Andrews. At that time, they were able to rearm the aircraft and prepare for that day, anything that came. Our job was to get the man back home and figure what was going on. Picture, if you will, flying back into Washington, D.C. I look over the pilot's shoulder, there in the distance, the smoldering building. Okay, it's Pentagon. That's what I see. That's what I remember. Pentagon. We sent the fighters back into Andrews first because we didn't know if there's still anybody laying in wait for us. So we sent the fighters in to sweep the airfield, and then we came in to bring the president. Haunting. Haunting to me, but that's where I was at. We come in and land at Andrews Air Force Base. Walk in, Marine One sitting there waiting for him. President gets off, wants to fly over that to see what happened, and then get ready to address the nation that evening. That evening, President Bush addressed the nation. Look at him. A couple years later, as his hair turned gray, the weight of the world's on his shoulders. Our nation had been attacked. We should never forget that day. 21 years later, it still haunts me. I can't watch the news all day on that. Kind of becomes surreal. It was such a crazy day. But I will tell you, I've never been prouder of the guys, the men and women I work with on Air Force One that day. I've never flown with a more professional group of airmen in my career. No voices were raised, matter of fact, very businesslike. Doing this, doing this. I was honored to be part of that crew, and I'm honored to have this little piece of history from my story. I'll leave a blank slide here. Like I said earlier, this is my story of September 11th, 2001. I'm sure each and every one of you in this room that remembers that day could build their own slide for where they're at on September 11th, 2001. but I wanted to take this opportunity to share this story with you. And Courtney's dad asked me to come up if I had time to come up to Pennsylvania and to give this presentation. I said, I'll do the best I can, John. I've got a lot of moving pieces in my post-retired Air Force professional life. But I was very honored when he would think that this would be a fitting topic for the Rotary Club here. And how fitting is it to be surrounded with such great veterans in this room. I want to thank all the veterans here for your service. And I'd like to thank your families too. Families are part of the veterans' career and service that people don't really talk about. So I thank you. I thank you for the great job as color guard today. You guys did a great job. So with that, I would like to finish by saying thank you. And I'll answer some questions if you have any for me. If not, thank you for your great day. Thank you for everything you do for Rotary. It's a worthwhile endeavor. Thank you very much. President Glenn, do you have time? Do we have any questions or anything from the audience? If not, there's a question here. Yes, sir.
Until the president made the decision to go back to DC, who was making the decisions about the stops along the way?
Good question. If you notice, we didn't go to a Navy base, didn't go to an Army base. We didn't go to a Marine base either for some reason. I wonder why. I'll let it go at that. There was a lot of influence from the military aide to the president. The military aide to the president has 5 functions. He's aide de camp, military aide does awards and ceremonies. He was our liaison between the White House staff and the flight crew. And he was trying to direct the ship, but it didn't make sense to go to the bases that he was calling for. So Barksdale was the logical choice for security reasons. And just because if you had to go to a safe location for the president on the fly, it made sense at that time. To the crew. Any other questions? I will be here for a couple of minutes back in the corner. Yes, sir. Navy, go ahead. So thank you. Yep, the question is aging of the presidential fleet and the replacement aircraft. I actually do. In my professional life now, I work for a company called Satcom Direct Government, and we provide commercial satellite bandwidth and communications to the government and the military. I have a contract that will go on the new VC-25B. Air Force One, when it's not flying the president, is actually a VC-25A aircraft, and there's 2 of them that are at Andrews Air Force Base. The new aircraft will be a VC-25B made by Boeing, but it's being slipped to the right and to the right. So by the time the aircraft comes into service, it'll probably be 2025 to 26 at right now. I do know at Andrews, I was at Andrews this week for meetings on Monday, that they are actually building the new facilities already built, and they're getting ready to move into the new hangar. The challenge with the new 747, it's an Air Force, it's a Boeing 747-8I. So the wingspan's a little longer and the body's just a little longer. So it couldn't fit in the previous hangars that we built for Air Force One. It's like 22 foot, I think is a difference. Does that help? Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. That's right. Yes, ma'am. We all lost a piece that day. Yes, ma'am, I agree. Thank you. Thank you. My honor. Thank you. Any other questions? I think I had one more. And I got one more question. I had one more question. Yes, ma'am. So the question was, is Air Force One, can it be air refueled? The answer is yes, and I'll go into that a little bit more. And I will tell you, there is some snacks that are on the airplane, and maybe that was one of the companies that I can recall. But I don't want to make anyone mad because we just came from Hanover and there's a lot of other companies up here in the snack capital. But real quick on Air Force One, I didn't bring it up. The reason we loaded up as much fuel and food, Air Force One can stay airborne about 30 days, okay? It is air refuelable. We had enough food on board for 30 days of flight, and we had about 50 people on board that day, crew, staff, president. The limiting factor on Air Force One, does anyone like to take a guess what the limiting factor on Air Force One could be? Who said that? 3-day pass for you guys. So Air Force One can't jettison its laboratories. So you have to physically land and dump the latrines. So that would be the limiting factor of Air Force One. What you could do would be the bathrooms cannot be jettisoned in flight. Now I'll bet you on the new one, it might be handled and corrected. But that was a limiting factor, latrines. Yes, ma'am. So with that, again, thank you. My wife and I will be here for a couple minutes. And if you have any questions, please come by. But thank you for your time. And I appreciate being here today. Thank you.
Dale, no worry on the snack foods. Hanover is in York County, even though they don't believe it. So it's actually anything from York County. We're happy for that representation. On behalf of everybody here in the Rotary Club of York, thank you for your presence here today. I know you said several times that this was your story, but what struck me as you told it was you're an embodiment of the fact that your story and your colleagues' stories on that day directly affected every story in this room. And for that, we extend our deepest, deepest thanks and appreciation to you. Thank you. Colonel Holland has signed the book plate for the book, The People We Keep by Allison Larkin, which will be donated appropriately enough to the York Country Day School today. As you heard earlier from Lynn, next week our speaker will be Don Graham. Don is our own local entrepreneur, community leader, philanthropist, founder of numerous companies that were laid out earlier. Don and his wife Ingrid have also supported many projects outside of our community, including the University of Michigan, as well as right here in York, York College, Penn State York, and the YMCA. And as you heard, Don will be talking about his remarkable life and the way that his story has impacted all of ours. Members and guests, please rise for the retirement of the colors.
Forward, march.
A closing quote from the great Mark Twain. You can't depend on your eyes when your imagination is out of focus. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This concludes our meeting of the club today.